Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining myself and Darian here on the Phil Rice Substack, and I'm grateful to you all who have chosen to join us live or even watching after the effect. I've been sort of following Darian's work on and off for a bit for the last few months, and I heard him talking on a recent podcast here on Substack, and I thought, well, I'll hit him up for a chat. I found it quite knowledgeable, quite thoughtful, and I have an interest in bigger picture conversations, and I thought that this would just be a really great opportunity just to talk about a bunch of stuff. So, Darian, thank you so much and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So hope everyone else enjoys this too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like I said, we're obviously in different time zones. So you're on the west coast of the US, is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So
Yep.
I'm down in New Zealand, so we're about a day apart ish. But I'm here in the future, and the good news is, guys, is that the future has it's
Yeah.
Tuesday here. So for those of you that like a bit of time travel, there you go. So Darian, I'd really love it. If you could just give us a little bit of a synopsis of your background, and whatever you're prepared to share, to give us just people a bit of context, I guess.
Well, I guess it'd probably be best to start with my materialist phase because that's sort of what I came here writing about, that the breaking free of the final tethers to any sort of materialism. That's what I started writing about. Um, Getting over the sort of, not shame, but like the stigma of speaking about anything uh, not materialist, just out in common circles. Um, because when I was around maybe 12, 13, I became like a devout sort of atheist agnostic. Like that was the first thing that made sense to me when I was young. I had read the Bible, like actually read it. Not the people around me weren't really reading it, but they were sort of culturally practicing Christians. And in reading that book, I realized no one else had made sense of this. That they were not actually living by this doctrine, and it was a sort of vestigial text that had nothing to do with how people were living, and it was very confusing to notice that sort of cognitive dissonance just very early, uh, single digit age, recognizing that people are not driven by the straightforward logic that they claimed to be driven by. Um, that caused a lot of problems for me in youth. Just feeling that everyone sort of lied and they weren't quite aware of it. Um, they were in this sort of mirage, this dream-like, unclear sort of reality. Uh, and sort of atheism, sort of that was my first venture to build up a model of reality for myself that was not just um, what was going on around me. Like it was my first move to develop my external self, and that lasted for maybe 5, 6 years. I studied psychology, I studied philosophy, several material sciences, things that are acceptable in the material worldview. Through studying psychology, I came upon psychedelics. I started doing psychedelics, and as soon as you do those, they start to break every uh, sort of formed opinion boundary, every cultural identity hang up that you have. Um, and so that opened me up more to magic, to yoga, to parapsychology, the more woo aspects um, that I could only before sort of see as potential. Like I was open. I thought maybe these things have some, like astrology has some depth to it or something. But upon taking psychedelics, it was like, oh, I now see that there are patterns in the universe that make sense of this. It is not just um, it is not just a thought for me anymore. It is a lived experience that there are extremely complex, magical, miraculous patterns at play in this world we're living in. I guess that's a decent little intro.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, and I think about my, as things unfolded for myself when I started exploring meditation, because that was really when it started. And as a performing musician, as someone who wanted to be on the front of the stage, showing off, and then having realizations that was, I guess it lost its shine all of a sudden, and then there was this sort of like remembrance back to when I was 17 and I was in my friend's bedroom, and I had the joint was passed around, and you have a burn on this joint. I'd smoked before, but had no effect. And this particular time, I'm in this room. There's this music playing. He was a music lover, and he had this wide variety of music. And I remember just going, "Oh wow, there's something happening here." I closed my eyes and I started exploring this tunnel. And I started hearing this music and these lead guitar solos that I'd never heard before. Inside, not outside. And I found this I just found that closing my eyes and looking inside created a very interesting explorational experience. And later on in life, once I got tied up in corporatism and all these types of things, and then getting burnt out in that, and then sort of sitting one day on the couch and just closing my eyes and just going, "Oh, I remember that thing," and I didn't have the joint at that point, and I just started taking an interest in what was going on, and I knew that there was something important about this. There was something valuable, and there was something that could be, harvested for myself for personal gain and also shared. And I've always had an interest in psychology because I even if indirectly and unconsciously, there's been this observation of, I guess watching the way the collective sort of moves and shifts and how trends come and go, and why is everyone suddenly doing the similar thing and talking about the same thing, and why am I caught up with this? Why am I interested in what other people are interested in? But when I started exploring, I explored some other psychedelics too, and you're absolutely right. I found that there was like a dissolution or a dissolving of certain and culty or cultural, if you will, sort of linkages and bridges that were formed from earlier in life, and it opened up a wider vista of it for view, and I was able to step back. Now, I also found that there were some sides to that were maybe not so helpful, but it was really about the set and the setting, as some would say. But it was. Thank you for that intro, especially talking about materialist, because I find that sometimes I have to kind of explore something all the way as far as I can, and then go, "Oh, that's too far." Then I'll pull back, and okay, about here's good. And then there's the other end where you go, "Okay, let's go all the way to the woo," and it's like, "Well, that's too far," and then I pull it back. And then I kind of found somewhere nestled between, I guess what I'd call my hermetic practice, which is my spiritual science practice, which is very grounded, almost in a physics and an engineering sense, where I'm seeking to take a very objective view. And then there's also this almost like a shamanic kind of end as well, running these two, as one of my friends would say, running these two lines at the same time, because I found that if I go too metaphysical and not enough woo, if you will, and following the rainbow just for sake of following the rainbow, I can get too caught up in one, and there's almost like it's not that it's unhealthy, it's unhelpful, because no, it probably is unhealthy too, but I'd love to hear what you've got to share about this kind of balancing. Some might call it, I guess, maybe in a neurological and neuroscientist perspective, like the balancing of hemispheres. But yeah, I'd love to just pass it back to you, sir.
I've been playing a lot with anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner. So a lot of when I am touching on the left and right hemisphere, that cold, logical masculine, and that sort of loose, floaty, embracing feminine, those two sort of polarities. I find a lot of similarity with Ahriman and Lucifer in Steiner's cosmology, where these two forces are sort of they match pretty identically with the Ida and Pingala on either side of the Sushumna in yogic philosophy. But these are just two the lunar and solar energy on either side of the self, essentially. Um, and it's sort of through recognizing this sort of yin and yang at play in the world, we come to find that middle pillar. And I think that's what people are doing whenever they do the actual like middle pillar exercise or raising up the kundalini or whatever they're doing. They're trying to come to the self in a more embodied way than just the pure, perhaps Vedantic realization of just the I know I'm the self and that's sort of it. Um, they really want to understand how that functions cosmologically, like how does that lead to the building of bodies and of thought constructs and things of this nature. But these two hemispheres, they're present all the time in everything. We have these two eyes and these two halves, and they're all sort of trying to do things. And in a lot of people, especially who have not started any sort of spiritual path, I noticed that they have a bipolarity to them where it's their left and right hand are sort of at war with one another. They're not working together yet. And I noticed this to be extremely common for people who have no sadhana, no spiritual path.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to put my phone on charge. There we go. Yeah, I think this is part of the sort of the exploration, isn't it? Is like, because you can wander too much into the thing and you discover the ups and the downs of it. You discover the plus and minus within the plus. You discover the plus and minus within the minus. And this yin and yang conversation is quite interesting because it's very useful. It's a great way to make things very simple in the sense of, even though there's vast complexity, what do we call it? We might call it squaring the circle, where we're trying to take familiar mechanisms and seek to make sense of something that is far beyond, where our current understanding is. And this, these two forces are at play. In dream work, we can see representations of this as well with the personification of situations, relationships to things and events, people, and that turned into people. And we see this in the form, I guess, of the anthropomorphization of the gods in various traditions as well. Where some people would say, well, they're actually people, and some people would say, well, actually, they're just this is an exploration of love in the form of Venus. When Venus goes and runs amok, your love life is, you may be getting a bit promiscuous, but when she's working well, then your love life is good, sort of thing. And so we can explore these various polarities and scales. And I had something to say on when you were talking about the yin and yang side of things, because there's a no, it's lost me. No, but yeah, I think when you explore the length, girth, and width of a particular polarity, and you go, oh, like I said before, about there, and that's too far for me. I think we're exploring. We have certain sensibilities that we develop in our very earthly sort of formative years. If we have that, I'd say that most people in the West probably have a reasonably sort of grounded growing up. I'd like to think so. Whereas we can, I think, become, what I've noticed anyway is that, oh, you're into that religious stuff. Okay, well, off to church with you. Okay, you're into, this, then over that end, or if, are you one of those woo-woos? Okay, well, there's bound to be something there for you, sort of thing. It's a very, I guess, there's a bullet point or a heading or a grouping, and it reminds me of like when they introduced music genres. They wanted to create categories, and then there's obviously strata within those. But this idea of exploring and yoking these two forces, exploring them and then finding them within, and because we're also here to live our lives as well, and I found that, after spending a good amount of time in the corporate world and seeing how the nicest people can turn into the most ambitious sociopaths sitting around the boardroom table, and then hanging out with spiritual types too, and seeing that sort of like that element mix in. And it's really cool that you mentioned Steiner as well. I've really only just started becoming more more, I guess, more aware of sort of what he has to offer, because a friend of mine is homeschooling her children through the Waldorf system, and it has a heavy focus on, not engaging analytical sort of almost hyper-rationalism, and at a young age. It's more about developing sort of visual faculty. I would assume, I'd like to think that in other countries that don't have the same kind of process or educational system that we have, they are having a far more spiritual reality, because they haven't kind of activated what you could almost call unnecessary processes. Why do we have the education system we do in the Western sort of situations? From my understanding, it was is because they were trying to put people into jobs for the Industrial Revolution and these types of things, and that's a sort of carried through. But unfortunately, when you start training children in their formative years, to impress upon them, I guess, we start learning these highly involved cognitive processes before these sort of earlier natural faculties start to arise, of visualization and story. That things get, I've worked in schools as a music teacher. Most of the schools I taught in did not have a music room. I was put into another room, like when I would show up in that, and it showed where the priority was. Some definitely did, and some had a music room, and they went out of their way to encourage that. I mean, that's a loose sort of example, but I think too, from listening to a Tai Chi chap I know speak, he was also mentioning pure yang comes from pure yin. And I found that interesting because, as I explore various traditions, I notice that there's a focus on finding the stillness, and then the natural expression can arise from that. Whereas if we're always sort of doing like we're told to do, it's almost like you don't get to sort of sit in the quiet and see what naturally emerges.
Well, a lot of what I engage with is not all the time, but it's very political, because I am thinking a lot about the people who are sort of running the world. Many of them understand a lot of these concepts, and they're leveraging sort of occultism, mysticism, to to create a world that is not very good. It is not a for the people sort of environment. Um, so it's a sort of maladaptive or very very exclusive group to whom these occult processes are being geared toward, at the expense of all others. Uh, and I try to sort of poke holes through that, because it appears to be a group belief wrangling system, to where getting the majority of people to believe a certain way causes reality to behave a certain way. And this is just like a collective dream realm. And we are believing in lots of things like scarcity, and that there's not enough, and the finite reality. Lots of things which make a game where people can be at higher or lower levels. We're instantiating a hierarchy, for purpose of control, um, which I find terribly problematic. It's not it's a very predatory system in that way.
Mm,
But yeah, but how this relates sort of to our own lives, we are doing this to ourselves, and those big bads out there that we could blame, they are basically our shadow. They are presenting us with what we need in some way or another. Um, and it's sort of like it, God presenting himself as terrible in this moment. That's sort of what your shadow is. It's playing the villain, the foil. Because I've come to see reality as a narrative construct. It is a story. It is not a set material physical universe. Um, and just having that as your cultural baseline, having that as your root understanding of reality makes it so that, to quote the Bible, those are foundations of sand, and you cannot build any higher constructs on top of these that make any sense. So people who have this culture that they're brought up in, where it is overly grounded, as Steiner would call it, Ahrimanic, where there is no spirit. It is just the letter of the law with no spirit behind it. People don't understand the words they're using. They're using them because someone else used them. Things of this nature. This is that cold, dead world that we're living in. And you see lots of the problems that we have, like the explosive problems. I mean, because we have these grueling, steady problems, and that's not what I'm talking about. The explosive sort of lashing out attempts to get out of this sort of swamped reality. Those are caused by this. Those have to happen. Like when we see even natural disasters or mass killings or anything which is sort of explosive in nature. These things are happening because there has been a friction for a long time, psychologically, economically. Just all is one thing. So it's just when I'm talking about any process, it's usually worded to mean a meta process. So this friction is occurring, and then things explode out, and then people appear confused or enraged, or they are surprised by this. But when you're on when you have certain levels of perception, these are just obvious things that must happen, just as death must happen. Like you're going to die. It no longer, at a certain level of practice, this is no longer a problem. Um, you sort of come to understand that life and death are always present, and there's no longer a identification with one or the other, and that sort of yin and yang most prominently display themselves as life and death. That's sort of what they appear as to most people. But that is present in everything, and they're just dancing everywhere. The Shiva and Shakti, the active and passive force, observer and observed, are just constantly doing their thing. And a lot of people talk about abiding or resting in presence of some sort. Some will call it stillness or silence, or you'll find God in silence or whatever. That silence is when you recognize that in the apparent two, there is this one thing, and that's all there is. You can just sort of rest in that. That's you can sort of make your practice so subtle that you do not need to do a dedicated practice. You may find yourself doing it. I enjoy many of the processes, but simply by understanding what is, uh, you attain a level of, I think some people call it like nirvikalpa samadhi, or I don't remember which samadhi it is, but it's just the constant awareness that everything is Brahman, or you are that. Um, I would sort of make that I guess that is the primary goal of all paths, to know that you are that, whatever that is, whatever you've been seeking, chasing, whether it's money, girls, fame, whatever it is, and eventually you get tired of that and come to God. But whatever your goal is, you're that.
Yeah, and as we sort of those who are discover the value of quietude and stillness. I mean, I used to play I used to be in a very noisy, I guess, very active, busy kind of profession. Playing in a band, working with children in schools. It was loud all the time, and you know, jumping from stimulus to stimulus, it was easy, And then when those sorts of things don't, scratch the itch anymore, there's a new itch, and it's like it demanded isolation, quietude, solitude, and new fruits arose. And then it's hard to see them if you haven't tasted them before, if you haven't experienced them before. And it's great too. Thank you for bringing up this idea of this. I kind of think of it like this: there's a game of tennis going on that everyone's watching, but there's the owner of the tennis club, right? And then we're all watching these people watch this game of tennis. If it's a political team, it's like go team red, go team blue, and it's just back and forth. And all it is that these election cycles are really just, I if I'm brutally honest, I have to say that, there's a long game going on that's multi-generational. It spans lifetimes. And, if we are truly embracing the idea of, I guess what you might call it, a spiritual immortality that transcends lifetimes, reincarnation being, maybe one word for it, the people who, I think one of the biggest jokes for me is that there's this facade of ineptitude that's kind of pushed out to the public to say, you think about all the cartoon characters that are pushed out the front to represent the most stately of us. And, some of them are pretty convincing, and some of us are like, they've got someone playing a tuba theme running behind them, Family Guy, or, you name it. And it's like, and then we get this kind of, these people couldn't organize, there's nothing going on here. They're not up to that. And then it's like, but on the flip side, they're able to present these very complex systems as well. And so it's like, it creates cognitive dissonance, I think, with the public. It's like, look at this guy. He couldn't even put his shoes on. But over here, wait a minute, now they're trying to get us all to, latch onto the grid, snap the grid into place. And
well, these are all pieces on the board. These people, these people that you're seeing, they're never the players. It's sort of like the meme of the puppet with the puppeteer with layers of puppeteers all control it. You're never going to see the top levels, and I'm pretty sure that at the higher levels you get into things like egregores or multi-generational spirits, which people are worshiping, or even if they're just they could be anything. They could be discarnate people, they could be spirits, they could be just a code people follow. I'm sure it's all of those things to different levels of the dark hierarchy, whatever it is. But this is just their religion. This is just what they follow. And there's layers of it, and most of us, all the normal people, or all the people who are observing the bread and circus, the sports team, we're not part of that. We're not involved in their. You can sort of think of it as they are a different species than us. They are not they are in competition with us, as two species are for Earth, essentially, like for resources, for joy, for whatever it is. And that's sort of that's something a lot of people need to realize, that it's not a problem of them being people in the same way that we are.
I think too that there's this comment that I see come up. If God was truly a loving being, He wouldn't let these things happen. That's an excuse for atheists, I hear a lot as well. And it's like, well, this is where metaphysical sort of understanding of like stepping back and seeing the necessity for polarities to exist is like, well, evil is allowed to exist because it sort of provides us a contrast. It gives us the thrust block to go, oh, push ourselves away from, not that way, I want to go this way, depending on your orientation. And the problem is that, we keep seeing this recurrence of like blindly putting faith. It's almost like this, it's I mean, we could talk about the sort of the utopia of we could talk about etymology of words like anarchy and how they've been Hollywoodized into being something else. I wonder if the Sex Pistols were paid off to make a song that got real famous all of a sudden. Like, let's trash this word because this could actually unlock people's individuality and their consciousness. But the power of words. Oh my gosh, like even those original words that had egregores in themselves, they were loaded over time. Intelligent people, like those words had power, and now everything's moved from being denotative, original meaning, to connotative. And you're taking that power. I mean, I was listening to a guy talk on Facebook earlier. He was talking about, egregores can be built up over time, and then they can be hijacked. And you've got that power reservoir there built up by, conscientious practices and people who have the best of intention. And then basically someone comes along with a big group of people and they all get the keys to the mansion, and then they start turning the ship in another direction. And it's like,
Yep.
I see this with I see this in pop culture with things like Star Wars and Star Trek and, these huge cultural sort of movements. And then somebody comes in and goes, right, thank you for all that energy. Now we're going to turn it in this direction and use that power generation to feed a new kind of zeitgeist or something, if you will.
Yeah. I think the biggest example of this is the Abrahamic God. It is not. It is not as people want it to be. I don't think it is a very hijacked entity. Or swarm of entity. It may, I mean, the heavenly host. It seems like it may be a group of beings in some sort of pantheon, partnered with angels and whatever, that were sort of created for a purpose or partially created, and others were naturally occurring, that were sort of spun to do corrupt things now. Because you look at the Catholic Church, you look at most churches, they are not doing the Christian Christly thing. They are not. They do not even appear interested in this. So I have seen it to be a corrupted spirit in that sense. They follow a Geist, which is not to the benefit of people generally. When you mentioned Star Wars was one of the first things I noticed where I was like, oh, the Emperor was playing both sides and of the war and constructed both sides. And that was like, I think I watched whenever the third prequel movie came out, I like snapped in my head, politics isn't real. So I was, however old I was when that came out, where I just lost all interest in politics because I saw that it was just a mirage. It was an illusion constructed by one party to appear as multiple. And there was also when you were talking about gods earlier, people used to perceive with both hemispheres at once. There was less separation. As we've been growing, we've developed a larger corpus callosum, the center of the brain, which prevents either side from connecting, or doesn't prevent. It tunes what information from each side are able to communicate with each other.
Is it like a regulator?
Yes. So this has made our dream and waking life separate. They did not used to be separate. We used to be in a more simultaneous experience where symbolic interpretations that we normally experience in dreams were happening while we were awake, and vice versa. It was a very yes, there was just less separation in that. And we've been developing this faculty in order to grant us freedom of choice in a lot of ways. Because if you are immersed in this world of symbol and direct experience of higher dimensional forces, then you leave everything up to them. You do not do anything on your own because you know that there is a higher being there to guide you. And those beings are still there guiding you in a way, but it is a much, they act much more like mediators now because we are not in direct sort of. If you think about cosmology, it is a stepping down of abstracted energy from the most high one being down through layers and layers of devas or angels, these complicated forces down into man and below them into insects, animals, whatever. Materialism will claim it to be a bottom up, but that is not quite how it works. It's a top down from the, or rather a horseshoe, because the top just sort of goes up in a U back into itself. So the one divides into the 10,000 things and then remerges back into the one. And it does this forever. To what end, I don't know. But you can notice the inherent purpose or meaning to reality through this process. So it is not a pointless or meaningless cycle that some would call like samsara. There is an inherent sort of beauty to it. Utility is a bad word, but it's like there's love and wisdom present in the process at all levels, all the time. And I think just noticing that helps a lot of people. Because I'd say most people, 60 to 80% of people on Earth are just in pain all the time. They're not happy. They do not have a they don't have a psychology or a cosmology. So to be in bliss, essentially. They do not have a culture which allows them to experience joy. It sort of sucks it all out of them. And this is very nihilistic, pessimist reality that we've been wandering towards for, I don't know, I'll say roughly the turn of AD, slowly approaching this point where we are now of, I think we're hitting a bounce. I think we're bouncing back up. It appears that just through conversations with people, seeing the climate of culture online, we've hit the limit of this more left-brained, Western-dominated. There is no spirit. There is no essential meaning. There is no things that we would consider Eastern or more Yin influences, which were dominant before the turn of BC to AD. We seem to be reaching a union of those two forces. I would hope that happens sometime soon, but I imagine it to be a gradual process of people at varying levels integrating either halves of themselves to become whole people. People latching on to whole people as sort of celebrities, leaders, I guess, who start to infect the culture with positivity. But I expect this to be a long, like hundreds of years process of sort of resurrecting the feminine psyche in themselves, the ability to connect and understand the essential sort of Sophianic wisdom of reality. I think that will take quite a while. to achieve a baseline for everyone. Because people like us are more on cutting edge, like people in spiritual communities doing this kind of work. We're more on the cutting edge than most people. We're doing the work we're doing the work now that most people may take 2-3 more lifetimes here to get to. And we just sort of, we have to trust that it'll sort of flip eventually. The 80% who were materialist and sort of suffering will become 20%, and it'll sort of invert. And that's sort of the base. That's the core of what everyone sort of should be working toward if they're doing these processes.
Thank you for bringing up the prequel trilogy, because I actually just watched it recently. I managed to somebody gave me a box set of the first 6 movies, and so I've just watched them through. There's a value in exploring the conversation about what Disney has done with the rest of the story as well. But just quickly, I'm watching the scene where Emperor Palpatine, well, before he's the Emperor, he's sitting in his Supreme Chancellor chamber, and you've got Yoda and Mace Windu there sitting in front of this Sith Lord. And these are the most advanced Jedi that they're aware of, ahead of the council. And they don't know that this guy's basically pulling everyone's strings. And I just found so much value in exploring the allegory of that, apart from whether or not you can deal with Hayden Christensen and his acting skills. In the second one, it was quite challenging. But hey, look, as far as delivering and, in plot holes and all that, but as far as like the Chosen One, and then the Chosen One, you can see this journey of him going from one side to the other and wrestling with himself. And then, there's so much good takeaway from that. And I think this is where, sometimes it's good to be able to switch off and just watch and enjoy a movie, but nowadays it's too bloody hard because I'm trying to pull it to pieces and go, there's some kind of unconscious, potentially, messaging going on here that we can have takeaways from. But I think, when we're talking about the, I guess what we might call the adversary that's at play, that is ever present, it's potent, its agents operate in unity as they are allowed to. They're working with and against each other. There's this kind of weird faction game going on, and where, like you said, there's, you're either in the game or you're watching the game, but you can still influence. And I think from learning, watching, reading, practicing, especially practice, I can see that the reading is important. Like, it's so important to keep knowledging up, right? But then there's these practices where you're actually like going, okay, well, I'd noticed this. I was giving everyone advice. I said, hey, this is a good idea. You should do this. Hey, this is a good idea. You should do that. I wasn't seeing any change. And then I started having some crisis moments in my earlier life. And then I started having to make change. And then I started seeing change occur in the world around me. And this was a profound realization. I thought, oh, crap. Okay. This is on me. Okay. Me. And that gets hijacked as well, right? So, but the adversary is everywhere. These are the weights that we're here to lift. I tend to concur with you that this is going to take a long time to get the balance back. But I mean, if you just turn on your Xbox and there's no bad guys and it's just a walking simulator where nothing happens and you don't really take any value from it, there's no growth. I kind of feel that I like the horseshoe idea. Basically, we get planted down here to feed back up, and it's a reticulating knowledge system. I heard one theory which basically said, on one hand, someone did an analysis about the Old Testament, saying that there's actually a variety of entities posing as the supreme ultimate. That's one thing. But on the other hand, it was like, well, it was just, people aren't going to like this, it was a less evolved ultimate deity that over thousands and thousands and thousands of years, we've actually helped it to scale up because we are essentially it. And so when we learn, it learns, and it's a feedback loop sort of thing. Now, obviously we've got this idea of ancient civilizations that go way much further back. But yeah, I think, when it comes to being like a real sincere seeker of understanding the laws, if you will, and this isn't the sterile left, like we talked about at the beginning. It's easy to get caught up. And I've got a great meme somewhere. I can't pull it up on here, but basically it's like, it says Hermetics is, and then on one side, it's like, it's a guy in an old alchemist lab with all these books open and he's having all these experiences. And then that's what people think it is. And then over here it says what it is. And then it basically shows the raining green letters of the Matrix. And, and it's like, you got to be careful because, I mean, you go, oh, you see it, and then you're like, oh, where's the romance and the mystery and the adventure and the things that, and I think that after exploring deep metaphysics and trying to understand the maths of the wheelworks of nature and going, it's not enough to be all woo and it's not all enough to be all mechanics. You've got to find that sweet spot where you're having almost like a romantic, meaningful adventure, but you can pull on these two things to aid you in your quest because, I'm a Reiki practicer. I mean, some people in metaphysics would go, oh, you're not another one of them, eh? And it's like, oh, well, hang on. I'm a hermeticist as well. There's a value in helping people chill out, and giving them, because some people will have a shamanic experience. These are almost publicly and societally permissible vehicles. There's a permission slip that comes, that, what can we get a wide catchment for? Look, the bad guys are nearly infinitely resourced. Okay. And when I say the bad guys, I mean, I'm just saying there's people out there that take a delight in cruelty. They are feeding off others at the expense of others. And it's like, well, there's got to be a counterbalancing force to that just to offset it, And so, okay, well, what can we do? Well, what I'm discovering is that people have the ability to influence the collective. And you've either got so many, let's say you've only got, the average person may have 5 influence units. And then, someone who's been practicing a bit longer has got maybe 20 or 100, whatever, there's the gift of the gab. You've got these charismatic figures that can get up and steer a whole civilization almost. You think about these large countries, nation states and things you've got one charismatic figure that everyone's got their eyes on. Effectively, they're the front man of the band, right? Everyone's looking at that one person, but for some reason that person has the special sauce that can convince people to do the most incredible things. Really? Okay, well, he explained it well enough. You can rationalize anything if you want to, and you can put this kind of artificial or this layer of heart to go, we didn't want to do it, but we kind of had to. And, if we can get you behind it, this kind of thing. And I think, just quickly, exploring the metaphysical nature, the finding out how the wheelworks work, then because there's sort of sterile, very bland metaphysics, and then there's the cultural dressing on top, but there are universal principles underneath that we can dress with new story, with new narrative to inspire people to find that genuine aspect of themselves, to help them find their genius, not whatever society has assigned to them, and I think this is where, personal agency and discovering the true self, if you will, you mentioned before, if it's too much one side, like the woo side, you're waiting for answers. Okay, God, what should I do? Just waiting on the hotline here. Imagine if you're a parent and the kid rings you up every 5 minutes, do I turn left? Do I turn right? Do I do this? Do I do that? I had a moment of meditation. I'm going to share a personal thing just quickly. And that is that, I had something come through that was very useful. And that was, you won't get the answer in prayer. You'll get it through application. We're here to do do the work and then to see what works and what doesn't, because it's, taking the wrong turns and making the mistakes. This is what I took anyway, is like, how are we going to learn and create value? Because when you have a direct personal experience with something and you're able to articulate that in a way that many people can take benefit from, then I think you are essentially becoming a valuable asset in the world. And this is just one angle, but yeah, just wanted to share that.
I think it sort of works both ways. You were talking about the sort of leader of nations. I think there are two types of these people. One is a person who is themselves being directed by this group will. They are not in control of what they're doing. They are essentially an emptied out, hollow avatar of the collective psyche. Um, and this is, I would assume this to be more common. I would assume this to be what we have certain grooming systems in place to create these sort of narcissistic empty vessels to place into leadership positions. And I would assume these to be what those people mostly are. And then there is the very rare sort of it's sort of like a Dune universe where there is that very rare person who is actually leading the pack. They are the queen bee. They're directing the sort of consciousness of however many, and who knows on what basis they're directing it. Is it a bloodline connection, which is allowing like a hum, a sort of resonance between people? Is it just a cultural stigma where people have been painted to believe this figure is well, I mean, you see this with martyrs or people who are like hero worshipped figures, um, who may or may not have done what they're said to have done. People still place their beliefs on top of them as there's a sort of give and take to the leadership position where they are fed by the masses, but they are also attempting to feed the masses. And it's a sort of, you get this creature in the middle of them, which is not quite either of them. It's this third being. And it can be I find it very problematic to watch materialists who are unaware of any of these forces, even psychological forces, like how social dynamics function, how cultures form, all of these things which, even if you are a materialist, as I once was, I was already coming to terms with sociology and things of this nature. You can there's no real excuse to not be somewhat aware of these functions.
I agree.
But it does help if you're not a materialist, because I've mentioned in many different ways that having any low order or root foundational error in the code of logic of your reality model breaks so many things up. It's just like an actual coded program. You have errors down the chain, and then you're trying to build things on top, and you don't know why they're not working. You get confused. Things surprise you. But once you have a decent model of reality, things surprise. It is very rare that I'm surprised by much of anything ever anymore. It just doesn't happen. Um, it becomes much more special when it does happen, because it's like, I found a new, like, it becomes a seeker is always like hunting the next little miracle that sort of breaks their reality. They're not clinging to the world must be as I claim it is. They're happily looking for the thing that breaks their worldview. And I think that openness to be sort of broken on the rocks by the waves of existence, uh, doing this suffering sort of melts away. Like, you'll still feel pain and whatever else, but there's this it becomes more of a dance. It's like a learning process. It becomes more like the soreness of growth rather than just excruciating pain. Um, but a lot of my writing, a lot of my work has been sort of culminating toward the focus of sovereignty. That's the word I keep using.
A good word.
Yes, but it is the self essentially. You're finding the self, but it is the agency, the freedom, um, all of the things which we are told the Western Enlightenment brought us, these ideals of freedom and sovereignty. Essentially, I'm trying to actually embody that, and I've just noticed by doing that, there's lots of people claim to want these things, but if you bring it to them, they hate it. They are very upset if you try to be a real, authentic person. It makes their ego go haywire. They don't want to be a real person. They're all of these defenses come out. It is just this tangled barbed mess living in the minds of people and in the greater sociologic context. Our cultures seem designed to repress and enslave. And if you start chipping away at this, it's just like in the Matrix. The entire system just wakes up, and it's like, what are you doing? You are doing something to the nature of our collective. The Borg does not like if you try to do anything um, useful, like on a freeing, redeeming level. Um,
Yeah, this is such a great chat. I'm really grateful for this. Thank you, brother. You've got a wonderful way of articulating and making things, very, I'd say, if the more we can bring this sort of level of conversation down to the street without triggering people, so that they just switch off, because that's the problem, eh? Like, man, people get activated from one word. Man, you walk down the street and you could say, in New Zealand, you could say Cinderella Dern. Oh, that, you could say Trump. Oh, like you're going to trigger some kind of reaction, no matter which side. Oh, that's the problem we got, identity politics, this addiction to personality figures. A good brother of mine from my music days, we have a mutual fondness for this old band, In Living Color. They dropped a song called The Cult of Personality. And I don't know if you know that track, but it's one of the wildest musical tracks. All of their musicians deliver, the vocals hot, the guitar is wild. It's one of the best uses of music, I think, that I've come across, in a sense, because you've got this, you listen to that guitar, man, and it just lifts you up out of the seat. The guy's vocal is just solid. They're all in, but they're talking about Mussolini, Gandhi, JFK. They're talking about all of these figures. They're not leaning on one particular side. They're talking about the sort of the entirety of it. And but what it is it's like it's educational with hot hooks. And I think that is like almost like what memes are, in a sense,
yep.
nowadays, in some ways too. Like I'm grateful for memes. I started running meme shows on my YouTube channel just to start, bring some humor, because humor can be that, like, fun is like a lubricant for get people relaxed, right? Make them more receptive. Like if they've got their guard up, you've got to get them to relax. It's a bit of like conversational Tai Chi, if you will. And yeah, because I'm thinking, this is creativity, right? If we are indeed the creation of a creator, then in a sense, we could consider ourselves as being sort of agents of carrying on that process. Now, it doesn't mean just procreation with children, but putting, what is it? I heard another one the other day. Every time you create something beautiful, there's one less space for evil to stand in the world. And beauty, is humor. It's, there's a spectrum. Everything's a scale. So there's all of this vulgar, crass kind of humor, which I've hung out, I used to work in the corporate world, trucks and diggers, salty mechanics, telling the worst jokes, and then hanging out in the school system with young kids and that, and in a very feminine environment where it was, that's just not going to happen, that kind of thing. And so, but somewhere in the middle there, like you said, there's this third thing. I noticed this playing live on stage. I wanted to lift people up and get them excited, because when you've got the crowd in front of you and they're going, wow, this is great, and they're having a good time, that feeds back and lifts the band up. The band lifts up, it feeds the crowd, and then you've got this experience building up. Unfortunately, over time, it became challenging because just watching people degenerate due to the fact that they were imbibing alcohol, which that was very challenging, I have to say, because I just haven't really seen much positivity come out of that particular substance. But regardless, no judgment here. It's all part of rites of passage. But as far as this, will utopia ever happen? Yeah, exuberance. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So, I think that the process is far more interesting than sort of reaching the end goal, right? And so, what we call it, like, the utopia is like, oh, it's all done and dusted now, and it's like, okay, well, what next? Do we all just wait for things to turn to crap again so we fix them, or we, seek to retune things? And I think this is where the creative spirit, like I said, if we are indeed creators, creations of a creator, so many ways to be creative, in a way that, because there's abrupt ways of recalibrating things. I've found this, that like, I could be engaged in a much more active form of energy healing where I'm actively making changes, which feels great for my ego. Look what I did, and then there's this thing of like, okay, you know what, man, I'm just going to set up the room, make it so the bro can chill out, because that's what he needs, and he'll get what he gets, right? Whatever happens,
it's like
what he's going to get.
It's like creating set and setting without the psychedelic. It's like you're starting to do that process of setup, and then it's almost like you will act as the drug in the experience. I've had similar experiences to that with people, people who are just like materialists. They may have done psychedelics has been a great way for materialists to break out of that mold. But people who are still in that mold, who have done psychedelics, I've noticed things like Reiki or energy work, because I do not particularly Reiki, but I do those things. I've noticed they are very influenced by it, and it's like it feels really good to be able to just like to not do anything except move energy and notice that it's doing something, and you're just like watching, like, huh, you get to test magic in action, and that's a very enjoyable experience. Getting groups of people to engage in this process.
Yeah, well put. You're right. I think when I reflect back on it, being the conscious observer, where you're just, I sort of see, like, cause, I've gone so deep with sort of trying to research Reiki from the angle of being a hermeticist, right? Like, I want to know what's going on here. Why did he pick those things? And there was already this kind of thing going on beforehand. Basically, you've got a set of protocols for conditioning the vessel, or the hollow bone, because the stuff is just the stuff. It's a programmable medium. And there are different types of it, but it's like, it's like soda water. It's, fizzed up water, and then you add something to it almost, and the quality of you as it passes through you, there are psychic contaminants. You can take away from people. You can, if you're healthy and well, would you go see a really unhealthy doctor? Someone who's like, someone who's, eating, just eats bad food, doesn't exercise, and these kinds of things, it's that kind of thing, right? But yeah, just watching people who are like, oh, Phil's got a new thing going on, let's just humor him. Yeah, okay, I don't really believe in this stuff. And then they're like, wow, I had quite a vivid visual experience that was somewhat meaningful. And then I started bumping into all these people that I haven't seen for a while, and oh, that's nothing. And it's like, it's just all
Yep.
pure coincidence. And it's just like, yeah, cool as bro, whatever, you know. But that's the thing is that I think anything that prompts some sort of curiosity and just jostles them a bit is fun. It's that playfulness of the trickster in a sense. And, you know, I found this in practicing Tai Chi and Qigong when you're doing partner training, and you can, there's all of these weird effects, these unusual effects that you can elicit on other people just by moving your mind. Mind moves chi, chi moves body. Well, I can use my mind to move the chi to move other people's bodies, right? Now, this is a pretty wild, bold statement here, but, you know, anyone that's come to me and hung out has, the 70 or 80% of success, because it doesn't work on everybody. People have got subconscious barriers. Like, what is it? Those who don't believe in magic will never experience it, that kind of thing, right? You know, like they have such a rigid thing, but there are ways of, if you get their consent, and that's important to an extent too, is, you know, some people are here to be that intelligent adversary. Doesn't mean they're a bad person. It's just that they're there to create, because I remember getting squared up with like, here, read some skeptic stuff on Reiki, and I was reading it, or just energy healing, and I'm like, I was anxious as I had the anxiety, but I pushed myself through it, and I was like, actually, these guys make some good points. But at the bottom core of it, they are literally just mocking something they don't really know anything about or haven't experienced for themselves. But there was still value from it. But yeah, I think this kind of playful attitude to life has been highly helpful for me, and I'm glad that I have that background. But you know, moving forward, you know, there's, like you said, there's a lot of people who are suffering, and it's something that can be attended to, because they've maybe either got gaps in their knowledge, they've got a rigidity that's maybe placed by society that is preventing them from even being open-minded. Like, look, what is it? I think it wasn't Hillman, it was Stanley Krippner or something, was talking about, you know, there's the skeptics and then there's the scoffers, right? People who are hard-lined, like, no, like, forget about it. You know, that's weights that maybe you can't lift just yet. You know, there's ways of demonstrating metaphysical skillfulness. You know, I've got, you know, that's why I read the Bible now, and I'm like saying this. Jesus is out there. Like, if he didn't show off some kind of capability or demonstrate that, would he have got the traction that he got in society? You know, this is a question I have for people. He was training his disciples to do these miraculous things, which had really, I think it was I can't remember who said it. There was a quote. It might have been Joan of Arc or someone. They're only miracles to people who don't know how they work.
Mm-hmm.
These kinds of things, you know. And there's a glorious burden, I guess, of like going, you know what, man, you know, I got to go and spend 3 months in the bush just to train up so I can come back out to the village and bring back the fruits to inspire people and go, yeah, okay, well, maybe, you know, we don't see a big deity in the sky like showering us with blessings, but you know, there's other ways for that to emanate, because, like, you know, like we said earlier, you know, like people can become a bit dependent on things, and I think that you know, if we look at the ultimate, or the divine, as a parent of a type, they want to nudge you out there. They want to create. One of the bros called the Earth Experience a laboratory for leaders. And I quite like that, because it's like, okay, who's up for the task here? There's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of social issues, there's a lot of pain, but there's also a lot of ways to bring beauty, joy, inspiration into the world, and, you know, have at it.
Well, life does seem to be a sorting process. It is sort of the one dividing itself and then taking back what is good and sorting off what it doesn't want anymore. And it does this sort of over and over again. Steiner talks about this a lot. He's who I'm drawing the sort of horseshoe model from. He has that where the Earth goes through phases, and we're at the bottom of the bowl right now, and then there are, I don't know, 2 or 3 phases after this where we are in process to return to the Godhead, essentially, which are they're very similar in appearance to the yugas Hindu like the cycles, where we will be returning to a more etheric sort of experience, where we're less densely incarnate, where time is like we're essentially immortal at that point. I mean, we are immortal, but we realize it then because we have no need to drop a body at that point. Um, the utility of dropping a body is that is usually the only way people change. Um, if they were not dying, if other people were not dying, they would never develop, at least at this juncture. Um, it appears that there will come a time where all of the people who are alive no longer have this need in order to grow. We have different need. We'll have different needs to grow at that point. So things like death will steadily fall away in the way that we understand it. But again, these are thousands of years of steady, slow development. And when you were talking about Jesus, at that point, I'm pretty sure at that point was the time where people stopped seeing gods. It was right around the turn of BC to AD, where people were doing rituals because the people before them had done rituals, and the people before, and they were on borrowed knowledge. And this was a phenomena happening all over the earth. It was just there was less direct shamanic perception, and it was becoming an institution. And a lot of what Christ was doing throughout the Bible was sort of trying to get people out of the letter and back to the spirit, like away from the Sanhedrin and their just ritual without comprehension, trying to directly see again. I think that's the through line for all great teachers is they're not really trying to tell or sell you anything. They just want you to see.
And that's it. Direct personal experience. There is no real substitute for that. And the hollow ritual of sitting around the table with your family and your version of grace is rubber dub dub, thanks for the grub, without any heart and without any true engagement. I've talked to some friends who have traveled around many churches and gone, man, I like what he said, but I'm still not really getting anything out of it. I think there's a genuine yearning and craving, especially in your later years. Once you've gone and experienced the fruits and the futility of the world, if you will, you're looking for something much more meaningful, and you may not get it in the usual institutions. And that's why we have these esoteric traditions, which can give you direct experience that, you don't need a group for. I'm not discounting the group, because I remember having the first class and, we did some online things, which was great. But when we had the in-person, oh my gosh, the amplification of the experience. And, like I said, I'm a pretty level-headed person, even though I'm talking about pretty wild things here, but anyone who's watching this probably hasn't, it's probably cool with it, right? But it's palpable, you can't deny, when something significant happens, and then you go, well, hang on, and then you look at the setting and all that, and you go, okay, well, maybe it was this and that. That's good. That's a good practice. It's good to vet your experiences to some extent, but this idea of the hollow ritual, and then things over time, the value of that of what you're doing. It's just a mechanism, like it's just a finger pointing at the moon, right? But what happened to the moon? Who cares about the moon? We're doing the finger pointing kind of thing, like, this way. Well, okay, no. Like focus on the process rather than what the process is aiming at. And that's why, when I sort of lay, like, for example, so, I take the best, latest Reiki research and of, the processes, and then I overlay it with a system of hermetics, say by Franz Barden, and I go, okay, where are these things basically saying the same thing? They're both presenting exercises and ways of coming to know. One is about, like when you go to the gym, there's I've got a friend who's a bodybuilder, and he's got these tiny, well, it's actually she's got these little weights, and she's like, oh, I want to build this muscle here, so she'll like just get this tiny little 1 kilo weight and to do the special exercises to work that one muscle, right? Working isolated muscles. And then that's more the Hermetic stuff, and say the Franz Baden tradition, if you will. You're working all these isolated sort of areas, right? But then in Reiki, it's more compound exercises where you're working a machine and you're working muscle groups, these kinds of things. And coming to understand that is like, practices for people that are in a hurry. People are busy, but they want experiences. And it's like, well, I don't have, I might have an hour a day or 2 hours a day sort of thing, finding that sweet spot. Because the more people when you're sharing information, because you people want something, you're like, okay, you can have that experience. You can have a lucid dream. You can have an out of body experience. You can reach the Godhead. You can experience the void, non-dual light. Play with the elements. All these types of things. It's going to take effort and work. Some people are going to have a natural ability to reach them a bit sooner than others. But here's a good steady thing. Here's some things to watch out for. Don't do lopsided training. Don't forget leg day, guys. This kind of thing. Providing people with with things, because I think about it. Anything that if I can write a kid's book on it that people in my neighborhood can understand, then it's like, okay, now I'm getting somewhere because I'm able to bring these very dense things back down, and they're valuable to the community. I've taken the hero's journey. I've beaten the dragon. I've come out the other side, and now I'm back to the village. Here we go, guys. Here's some fruits. And in this case, they happen to be ones where you can have quite interesting experiences. They will take time, but if you haven't got 3-5 hours a day, here's something you can do that can pique your curiosity. And then maybe you'll start going, actually, I don't really need to work 40 hours a week. I'd rather learn how to do something like start a Substack up so I can maybe convince 1,000 people to give me $5 a month or something like that. Or build an online thing.
Have you looked at, there's others, but Kriya Yoga, it's very similar. It's basically energy yoga. In the yoga tradition, energy work. So it overlaps a lot of the things with Reiki and what you were talking about with all these things. They have their own sort of, I don't know. I feel that I'm very good of connecting lots of different models and paths together, just because I wasn't rooted or connected to any culture innately that I was drawn to. Like, I wasn't really drawn to any one in particular, so I studied the Indian traditions, even Native American, like Nagual shamanism, uh, Taoism, what's it called? Kabbalah, Christian Hermeticism, Egyptian, just everything. I looked everywhere for everything, and finding the similarities between like shunyata, the void, as being the same basically as Dath in the throat of Kabbalah, being the same as the Vishuddha chakra, the transition from the material elements into the space region, and being able to notice the direct experiences that you happen as you are crossing these sort of boundaries of experience. I find, for me personally, but I feel most people would benefit deeply from being able to point themselves on the map of development, because we're not in a culture which tells you who you are, what you're capable of, where you are on it. And this makes it very hard to grow, because if you don't know where you are on the map, it doesn't matter where you go, really. Like, it's not a there's no meaningful trajectory you can point yourself toward.
Yeah, I think that's if we bring it back to, like, where are you? Where are you going to go? Where do you want to go, and how do you get there? Right. Well, you got to know where you are first, right? And that comes with early stages of interacting with the microcosm and understanding the breakdown of it and going, okay, well, this is the vehicle, this is what it's composed of. This tells me, I found that, especially exploring the Reiki community, like comparative analysis, right? Like of theology and various forms of practices. I mean, the Japanese system that like understanding the Japanese approach to the energy system has been quite interesting because in Franz Barden's third book, Key to the True Kabbalah, which is essentially like more of a practical system of 3-point concentration, where you discover, in the first book, you have this mental body or the spirit, you have the soul, the astral body, the feeling body, and you have the physical vital body. And each one of these three bodies can be occupied, and you can cleanly learn to separate them and then train them to do certain things. So if you can train a visual element, a felt element, like a visual, like a color, a sensation like heat, or any of the four elementals, levity, gravity, density, coolness, and then there's a physical element, but there's a tone. So it's actually sight, sound, and sensation. When I look at Japanese kotodama, which is, very similar to Kabbalah, kotodama, Kabbalah. Kotodama means spirit of the word. And in this system of Kabbalah, I'm not talking about tree of life, and I'm not talking about path working or anything like that. I'm just talking about this particular gentleman's version of essentially coming into resonance. You have there's these building blocks of reality that we might call frequencies, and you train each one of the bodies to become a tuning fork to latch onto it, and it's highly potent. The book, unfortunately, is not the best explainer. It was written posthumously, etc. But in Japanese kotodama, there's a lot of chanting that gets left out of Reiki, and chanting was before there were symbols. It was just chanting, and it's essentially a type of mantra work, but when you look at their vowels are essentially related to elements, right? And in Barden's Kabbalah, you have the same thing. You have these relationships between the letters, these utterances, or these oscillations, and basically these universal building blocks. In the beginning there was the word. The world was spoken into existence. We see this in cymatics when there's some kind of physical utterance, and then there's a perturbation. And, things are organized into two-dimensional sort of, geometrical shapes and these types of things. But you're absolutely right. When you start seeing underlying similarities and similar conversations between cultures, but there's this kind of hierarchy of like, well, I'm right and everyone else is wrong. This is the thing with the religions, isn't it? Like you've got one over here saying, no, we're right and you're wrong. It's like, oh, actually, we all kind of agree that there's a supreme ultimate of some sort. And there's all these different ways up the mountain, and there's this cultural conditioning and lenses that are provided to us so that even though we're experiencing the same thing, we're going to have a different set of words and a background of perception that's going to shape how that appears to us.
I've found people, regardless of their tradition, who have actually attained something, they're much more open to other cultures because they can see that they've had a direct attainment. They can just, one recognizes another. It's all of the people who are, pre-initiate, who have not really had much experiences. They're the ones who cling most desperately to their culture. And this is a great problem. They're the people who are kneeling before the door, refusing to open it because it's just like you just need to shove them through the door. Like there's all this there are all of these cultural problems. And I've mentioned it in numerous different ways, but there are figureheads who sort of pay you to sit outside the door to make it appear as a most holy thing. These celebrity figures who maybe they're acting as the door, or they are they are the institution or whatever. There's this thing which is standing in the way of you and your development, and you're worshiping that obstacle. So they have become Satan. They have actually become. You are actually worshiping Satan. That is what this is. And I find this to be the majority position. This is the Satan is the king of this world. Most people are worshiping in one form or another this adversary figure, and it will shapeshift into whatever it needs for you to worship it. And I think that's we sort of need a new Hollywood. We need a new magic. A we need a new cultural art formation of all kind, not just cinema, because this is the way we control people, mass perception, through storytelling, through the arts. And if it is entirely controlled by people who are essentially the pedophile elite type people, they're all running the Moloch, Medea, whatever else other god they worship, these thought forms of corruption and control. We have to entirely detach our culture, our reputation, our economies from these kinds of people, because they're the people who are printing the money. They're printing the money. They're making the films. They're starting the wars. And it's just no great positive end is going to occur unless all of these are brought to light, and we steadily, as a species, collectively detach from them, and are able to discern what they are. That's a lot of what I've been trying to point at, targeting abstract concept like like an egregore, like a thought form, the spirits of corruption. You can label them. You can make them known to you, and see how they're influencing the parts which make up that whole. And this is extremely useful for, if you have an infestation of some sort, and you don't understand how it's coming about. How are they getting into the house? How is this happening? You're not really going to be able to prevent or end this from happening. So a lot of what my work has done is very similar to the shaman wearing the deer mask, the tiger mask. I put on the masks of villains a lot of the time. Early on, before I was even thinking about this, I was empathizing with and thinking from the fictional representation of villains and heroes. Both. I was doing both because I wanted to see what they were made of, essentially. And after doing this for a while, you can sort of see the motivations of evil people. It doesn't make you become evil unless you want, to. I guess I have the freedom to choose that, but I don't. But this is a deep lack in most people where they cannot perceive evil. They have the hear no, see no evil, and thus they are ruled by it. That ignorance is the greatest chain that people have.
There's things that people care about, and I think that's where it is. This principle of care. When you point out something and you relate to them and you break that initial bridge, because if there's any kind of guard up, right? You say, hey, you want to find common ground to create, to break bread over or have a conversation with, and you say, hey, like you could say Star Wars and go, and most people I know who are Star Wars fans from way back go, oh yeah, it's just gone a bit downhill lately. There's certainly a lot of political insertion, and there's a push for sort of this identity supremacy or identity politics or whatever whatever you want to frame it as, and people go, yeah, and it's like, but have you seen? This is where you bring it in. Have you seen all of these people online, these fans who are coming together on YouTube and making like exceptional fan films now? Like you're getting you know, I remember as a musician when we started getting USB audio interfaces, and you could record clean digital. You could plug like a high quality condenser mic into, you didn't have to use the 3.5 mm jack and talk into a dynamic microphone and still get the scratchiness. You'd get better than using a laptop mic, you know, but when you got this audio interface, suddenly people were starting to output like high quality audio, and it's like, bro, that sounds like it's been like professional, and I'm like going, yeah, it does. It's not that hard to make, you know, beauty, because you got to remember back in the day, not everyone had access to the resources, Now, and I'm not going to say AI, but I'm going to say that, there are industry standard softwares and resources available that are essentially free, and you can create high quality output that's going to be, because you've got to make, if you want to change the world, you've got to recognize that the frictionless approach, if you're going to make something, that's only going to be, that's going to trigger most people. I mean, look, some people are going to get value out of that triggering experience, but there's ways of like, I'm not going to say slipping one past the goalkeeper using aesthetics, but if you can make something that the whole family can sit and watch and talk and tell a story about, about why things are important or things like this, and make it engaging. One thing, I've been listening to this guy who's been in the game developing industry for 40 years. He made the original Fallout game, he made the Outer Worlds and these other games, and he's just this really generous guy with his knowledge in that. And, he talks about, like, why is it that every game has to have, it basically leverages violence and stealth. And then some of them will use dialogue and these other things, but generally it's going to be like, we're going to make you get engaged in some kind of violence at some point. And, for a young mind especially, I mean, that's just desensitizing. Something that, if they had to face in real life, they, it would be a very different experience. But I digress. I think employing the creative faculty for making the world to try and improve the world, and like you said, bring things to light. If I think about like guys like Dave Chappelle, polarizing figure in some cases, but also he's got a way of explaining things and just sort of like making it so that just about anyone can listen. I mean, I haven't listened to any comedians for a while, to be honest, but there's a way of sharing things in the spirit of fellowship, of just humans coming together and enjoying the experience, and then walking away with something of value, and using, I guess, we have the ability to make high quality output at a consumer level now. And however we choose to do it, but like you said, we do need a new Hollywood. I see that the indie developing world is actually really coming in a long way, because people have given up on the big studios because they're just sick of being told what to think and how to feel and be preached at.
Yep. I think we will slowly transition away from just this sort of individual, like we're going to have indie governments. I think we're going to have indie governments. We're going to, it won't just be artistic projects as it has been. People have all they need to begin sort of taking off the shackles of the old world in every way. The Hollywood, the government, the financial system that you're embedded in. Unless things are severely controlled in a totalitarian manner, things are likely to shift away from these old world tribal conveniences. There may be like smaller, sort of almost like fiefdoms, or essentially where every town can be its own little government, or maybe not a town, but with the internet, everyone is connected already, so we don't need these hard boundaries, hard physical boundaries. Of course, for things like laws, I'm sure you would want to be around people who have a similar mindset.
Mm.
Um, but the way things are now, people are so fractured in their culture because we are completely divided and conquered. We have no mutual belief system. Our morals aren't even integrated. The people who rule us are you know the antithesis of what our laws are supposed to uh, protect, preserve. Um, and I think the only thing stopping a complete sort of, well, I think it will start with creative pursuits like video games, movies, a new Hollywood, whatever. But in those new creative commons, there will be revolutionary tales
Mm.
presented, and this will slowly materialize into physical world. Um, this is this is essentially all of what magic is. Magic is the grounding of subtle forces into the material, but everyone is doing this constantly. There's no one who's not a magician. It doesn't. That's that's not really what this is. Every time you are thinking, creating, performing an action, you are going through the not the hierarchy, the process of creation. So your subtle thoughts, your these impulses which drive your body to move and produce things out in the world. Everyone's doing this. The magician is just someone who is conscious of these and is trying to understand fundamental uh, sort of reasons why they're doing this. What is driving them to be who they are, to do what they're doing? The same as a psychologist. Essentially, they're trying to understand themselves and gain more control in a way. But with this attempt to gain control, there's lots of there's lots of letting go that seems to be.
Mm.
Uh, well, I mean, in trying to conquer yourself, you find that you're it, you're all there is. So it becomes a sort of like there stops being two. So you're not there's no separation between you and that which you're attempting to control, and then you just release, and it's like you go back to chopping wood and carrying water.
You know, the world is replete with the most atrocious, terrible, horrific things, and some of the most stunning, beautiful things. And in an energetic form, you know, I don't think sex and chocolate would just hit the same. You know, we have an opportunity here to create and explore. I notice there are elements within the spiritual community that are just they don't want to come back, and they all they want to do is get the hell out of here. And it's unfortunate. I see that as a missed opportunity, really, and I think that's why I really love enjoying the various conversations about magic from a Western point of view, and that you can be a functional, like you said, everyone's a magician because you know everyone's acting on their thoughts in some way or another and bringing it into reality, however distorted and fractured that may be. It's still if that's why the mind is the ultimate battleground. There's a war on for our consciousness, for our attention.
Yeah, this is the war. The war in heaven is right here, and it's
Yeah,
always been right here.
totally right. And so if you get everyone thinking the same, their feelings and subsequent actions, what they call it, limbic resonance. Getting you in the feels. So there's a lot of play on that. And I'm not going to say that I'm hopeful. I'm just like going, we just need to do the right things. And if we're in a space where we can, it's like, well, why wouldn't you? I mean, seeing people do well, like seeing my friends who are like, you know what, I've had enough. I want to do more. I want to get out of my job. Like you see, getting embedded in the financial system, that's one of the biggest ones, man. Like, as soon as you've got your priorities wrapped around just getting by and survival, you are truly plugged in and getting your energy sucked out of you, and I think that what the online opportunity creates is that you've got value to offer. You have life experience that people are going to find valuable, and whatever that is, it doesn't have to be magic. But like I said, what isn't magic, right? But I just wanted to say that we're kind of getting towards the end of the time that I've sort of put aside. And man, we could talk for a long time. I think we'll probably have to do another one. This has been such a pleasure. Darian, I'm so grateful for you. You have a wonderful way of articulating things, and I'm very grateful for that because I would like to see. I think what I like about it is that I've only sort of heard you speak. This is the second time that I've heard you speak, and this is the first time we've interacted like this. But for myself, I aspire to being a great explainer, and whatever that sort of form that takes. And you know, when you're having a conversation with someone, you kind of gauge where they're at, and if you're trying to convey understanding, then you will put on the appropriate hat, or you will adjust yourself to give them as much bang for buck, because all we have is time, really, and then we're to start again. But Sarah, I would like to say just a quick thank you to the chat. Thank you everyone who's been hanging out with us. We will definitely come back and have another chat. This has been really great. I really like this method of communication. The Substack's great. But Sarah, I wanted to offer you the final words after I give you my deepest thanks for coming on and honouring my channel. So please, Darian, is there anything you'd like to share with anyone? Apart from obviously a dig, make sure you sign up for Red, White and Black, guys. Darian Substack.
Oh, I should probably explain why I called it Red, White, and Black. The left and right are the black and white, and then red is that down the middle. So these are I just wanted to symbolically enrich my content in every way in every atom of what I'm doing. I want there to be like symbolic. It's the same way you would imbue a sigil with power. I'm doing the same thing through all of my work, consciously. But yes, I appreciate all of you who stopped by and who will watch this afterwards. And I would like to do this again sometime.
Wonderful, thank you. And yeah, I think that idea of layered symbolism, like having like trying to insert as much magic into what we do, like conscious action, it's a really fun way to be. But I'd love it if you could just, if there's anything quick you would like to share, like a nugget of wisdom or anything, a short phrase, a lovely quote that you like, anything to sort of end the session.
Have you read Patanjali's Yoga Sutras?
Oh, the 6 Yogas of Patanjali. Is that the one?
Yes. Yeah.
No, I have not read it. I've only had a cursory overview.
There's a few translations of it. I have one. I need to read Vivekananda's translation of it. But the first, you were speaking earlier about, I guess we both were, going through life, the things start to become tiresome. All the goals that you wanted, you start to lose the excitement from them. A lot of people turn to God or some mystic thing. But the opening passage to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is, "And now yoga." So it's after everything, after you've completely run out of any meaningful goal, you're ready to start doing yoga.
That is awesome. That is absolutely perfect. Thank you so much, Brother Darian. Thank you, everyone in the chat. We will see you guys again soon. Thank you to Substack. And make sure you guys check out Darian's Substack, please. Have a beautiful day, and we'll talk to you all again soon.